we have a renowned charisma, Abbot Dr. Anto Puthenpurackal, who is joining us on this platform from Philippines. He hails from Wayanad, the green paradise in God's own country. A great personality striding across various disciplines such as economics, law, psychology, and his zest and devotion towards knowledge blessed him to do the doctorate in philosophy from Gregorian University, Rome. Sir, you are a stimulus for we young people, and we heartily invite you to give us an insight on the topic, pandemic, the period of stress and strain. Sir, it's over to you now. Hello, sir.
Hello, just a minute.
Sure, sir.
So we are ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let us open this evening with a famous prayer of Saint John Cardinal Newman. Lead kindly lights amid the encircling gloom. Lead thou me on. The night is dark and I am far from home. Lead thou me on. Keep thou my feet. I do not ask to see the distant scene. One step enough for me. Dear friends, good evening and welcome to all of you to this fine evening.
Good evening.
Let me at the outset say a word of congratulations and encouragement to all those behind organizing this webinar, in particular, the Students' Union of Al-Ashar Training College and its leaders. Thank you as well for inviting me to speak to you this evening. We are so familiar nowadays with words and expressions such as pandemic, coronavirus, COVID-19, etc. And even phrases like PTSD, post-traumatic disorder, which were only familiar and known to experts in the field of psychology and psychiatry, have become topic of common conversation of ordinary people. This is all thanks to the outbreak of the new disease caused by SARS coronavirus 2, christened COVID-19, coronavirus disease 2019, declared a pandemic by WHO on 11th March 2020, within weeks of its outbreak, as it had already brought about 144 nations in its grip within such a short period. We are familiar with a lot of discourses, articles, seminars, researches, speculations, and predictions of all type with regard to this disease. And so we need not be going into detail about a theoretical discussion on these. So I would like to focus my attention on the specific topic of psychosocial stress and strain impact of a pandemic in general and of COVID-19 in particular. Of course, without leaving out the mention of the general impact of a pandemic. We know a lot of terms such as illness, disease, sickness, syndrome, endemic, outbreak, epidemic, and pandemic, which are terms in the medical or psychological field. But at the same time, I feel it will be of benefit for the layperson to have some idea about what these terms mean and how they differ one from the other, so that we will be able to turn in the right direction in seeking a remedy. Illness is generally understood as the person's own feeling and perception of some health problem requiring attention and addressing. Disease is the health condition of one diagnosed as such by an expert based on the symptoms and the description of the patient himself. Sickness is generally understood as the condition of one with an illness or disease in relation to the society. For example, his absence from work, class, etc., on sick leave. Syndrome is defined as the health condition with multiple symptoms such as fever, headache, body ache, rashes, diarrhea, etc. Endemic can be understood as some disease which is particular to a group or region and remains generally within itself, though sometimes it goes out. For example, malaria and AIDS are considered to be endemic to Africa, as chickenpox to the United Kingdom. Outbreak is understood as the sudden appearance of a disease in a region, generally where it is not an endemic. The term epidemic refers to an infectious disease that spreads to a very large number of people in a region and surrounding regions in a quick time period. And finally, a pandemic is an epidemic that quickly spreads to many countries or globally with a high rate of mortality. This term was used for the first time as an adjective in 1666 and as a noun proper in 1853. Of course, if you want, we can elaborate and describe the differences of these terms much more, but I feel for our purpose today, this much is enough. But it will be profitable for us to linger on a bit more on the concept of pandemic. Experts in the field have not been able to give a clear-cut definition to what a pandemic is so as to distinguish it neatly from an epidemic. However, a pandemic can be understood as an epidemic of an international scale with a very high rate of infection and mortality, spreading at a very high speed. This means that an epidemic is considered and declared a pandemic when it affects human lives internationally, infects people in extraordinary numbers, mainly because its causes, virus or bacteria, are either new or have not been present over a long period of time, and so people are not immune to them. It has a high severity, rate of mortality, or high case fatality ratio, has a high speed of transmission, in general, does not succumb to known remedies, and finally, leaves a heavy impact on individuals and the social and economic life of the world. As we know, there have been off and on various types of epidemics down through the history. And many of them have been judged pandemics. The examples are a pandemic concluded to have decimated or wiped out entire villages in China around 3000 BC, and the plague of Athens around 430 BC. This was done mainly because of the findings done by excavation by experts in the field. Mass graves which they have found has been the reason, making them consider these the origin of these as pandemics in the prehistorical period. Coming down to the historical era, we can find there have been so many epidemics, but mainly 10 of them have been judged pandemics of a magnitude which could not be met with ordinary means at the time of their outbreak. We have 10 of them, beginning with the Antonine plague in the 2nd century, the plague of Justinian in the 6th century, Black Death, which devastated almost 25% of the human population in the 14th century, the 3rd outbreak of cholera in the 19th century, the Russian flu, again in the 19th century, the 6th cholera outbreak in the 20th century, and the famous or infamous Spanish flu, again in the 20th century, which broke out in 1918. The Hong Kong flu, again in the 20th century. And of course, the dreaded HIV or AIDS towards the end of the 20th century and still continues. These are the main epidemics experts consider as pandemics of global importance. Altogether, these pandemics have wiped away from the face of the earth around 325 million or so people. So we can understand the seriousness of a pandemic, especially if it is widely spread as the present one. The study of the history of pandemics brings to limelight smallpox, bubonic plague, cholera, and influenza as the most avid killers. Smallpox alone claiming the first place with a subtotal of 300 to 500 million lives in its different outbreaks, though many of them have not been considered a pandemic. It is of great consolation that according to WHO, this has been eliminated by 1979, thanks mainly to the wide use of the vaccine invented by the English scientist Edward Jenner in 1796. As we study history, we can see that humanity has been always inflicted by one calamity or another, either nature-made or man-made, like wars. And among them, pandemics or pestilence, so-called, has a very, very important and serious role to play. Coming down to our age, while still we are grappling with HIV or AIDS, though it has lost its strength a bit, the humanity is gaping into the mouth of another monster, one bigger than all its predecessors, in the sense that it has drawn the whole humanity into its gaping mouth within such a short period as less than a year. It doesn't require any introduction for people of today. And COVID-19 caused by the SARS coronavirus 2. In just 3/4 of a year, it has invaded almost all the countries, leaving a paltry number of 12 free of its invasion. as we look at it, we can see that COVID-19 differs from its predecessors in many aspects, especially the speed of transmission and world coverage. Even smallpox, Black Death, or Spanish flu had not spread so fast as the present pandemic in a single outbreak, though they have consumed more lives in their rampage. As already said, COVID-19 is caused by a coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, 2019, and it belongs to the RNA ribonucleic acid group. This same group of viruses were responsible for the SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome, and MERS, Middle East respiratory syndrome. But what makes it much different from its predecessors is its capacity to mutate itself constantly once it enters the human organism. Now, experts say that it is consuming human lives and threatening humanity in its new variated or mutated form called D614G. This ability of mutation makes the discovery of a remedy by way of vaccine or therapy border on the impossible for the medical and scientific field in its expertise till today. But we can hope that the human intelligence, as reflection and part of the eternal one that governs the cosmos, will come out as the master sooner or later. The speed and facility of its transmission also makes COVID-19 stand apart from the others, because its transmission speed and the capacity to evade any remedy, it has brought almost the whole world under its frightening shadow in such a short time as 9 months. Every major outbreak of an epidemic or pandemic brings it with it and leaves behind strong impacts on the peoples and regions hit by it. These can be cultural, religious, social, psychological, health, medical, economic, and political, both national and international. In kind, they are more or less the same with regard to an epidemic and a pandemic, the difference being mainly in the extent. As an epidemic, as we have seen, is more limited in extent, its impact too will be limited in extent than that of a pandemic. As the topic of our paper itself indicates, we will focus ourselves on stress and strain, the psychological impact of pandemics in general. Of course, one cannot forget and deny that the psychological impact of an event will always have some kind of relationship with all the other aspects of human life. Reduced mental capacity will definitely result in the reduction of the physical ones also. One of the major impacts of a pandemic is the condition of stress it produces in the society, in individuals and groups as well. We hear of stress so much in times of any major adversity, natural calamities, epidemics or pandemics, major accidents, and so on. And as we know, one can hear it mentioned these days of COVID-19 on a vast scale. Let's take a look at them to see what exactly is meant by stress and strain, what their basic elements are, and how one can cope with them. Actually, stress and strain are terms borrowed from physics, which defines them as stress is the force applied to a material divided by the material's cross-sectional area. And strain is the deformation or displacement of material that results from an applied stress. From this definition, we can see there are two elements, such as an action from without and a reaction from within. When there is a healthy proportion between them, the result is the desired effect. Otherwise, there is some type of distortion. But as we are not dealing with physics here, but with the field of psychology, our focus of attention is mainly on stress and strain in the psychological aspect, in the wake of events such as a pandemic. In this perspective, they are the result produced by encountering a sudden appearance of something, either real or perceived as real, in itself neutral in character, which poses a threat to the human person. This something is called the stressor, which can be anything that challenges or denotes negativity, such as problems of day-to-day life, sudden death of a dear one, betrayal of love, loss of job, failure in exam, a natural calamity, an accident, an epidemic or a pandemic, etc. And so causes some degree of internal or psychological discomfort. Stress can be seen as this discomfort, which can have influence on the physical side of the person, especially if it is not dealt with in the proper way and continues to disturb. Unaddressed and unresolved stress becomes toxic and then is called strain or distress. We all know that a certain degree of tension or stress in order is a helpful and necessary element. In the absence of it, there is no motivation, and without motivation, no forward movement or progress or achievement of a desired result. Let's take, for instance, music, either vocal or instrumental. If the vocal apparatus, in particular the vocal cords, are not pulled, pressed, or formed in a particular way, but are left slack, we know that there won't be any music coming out. Similarly, in a musical instrument, if elements are not brought to a state of tension, they will not produce any musical sound or any sound at all. This type or degree of stress is termed as eustress or good stress. And if they are tightened beyond their limit, the instrument will break, causing disaster or distress. Let's take another example of an examination. The stressor here is the question. If the question put to the student of the school final grade is one which can be easily answered by one of fourth grade, as what do you say when you leave a friend? Goodbye. There is no challenge and no intellectual growth takes place. If the question, on the other hand, is what is the difference between he bade him goodbye and he bade him bye for good, parting and parting forever, it makes him think and find out the answer and helps his growth. However, if the question is the expression most best friend correct or justifiable, it will throw him into confusion and may lose the whole exam and thus get blocked. Of course, the answer to the question will be grammatically not correct, but justifiable on the authority of Shakespeare, in general, not within the knowledge level of a school final student. In the first case, there is no stress, no tension. In the second, there is stress, but adequate. And in the third, the stress becomes distress and so is damaging. This can be thought of as strain or toxic stress. It can be either a situation that is seen beyond the present capacity or one which persists despite every attempt at overcoming and for which there is no remedy forthcoming, at least in the near future. We all know that a tension overcome creates satisfaction, excitement, and enthusiasm, and provides motivation for going forward. Though one does not succeed in winning at the first or second or a few more attempts, if there is the possibility of winning or means for winning are present, even virtually, stress may push one forward. This is the secret behind gambling. However, if and when the stressor is of such a nature that does not exist in real terms any means or methods to meet it and thus overcome the stress caused, it may turn into strain and destroy the person. In all these cases, the stressed individual needs technical guidance and help. Ordinarily, any stress can manifest itself in symptoms such as headache, muscular tension, lack of appetite, quick movements, etc., which disappear once the stress is resolved. But unresolved stress can have lasting effects on the physical condition of the person. It may lead to high blood pressure, gastric disturbances, ulcer, migraine, heart attack, depression, and other psychic disturbances, even paranoia, and may lead even to suicide. The degree of stress and its effects will depend on the nature and force of the stressor and the psychosocial strength of the person concerned and the social circumstances as well. A totally unexpected event will be a stronger stressor than the ordinary struggles and conflicts of daily life, though if unaddressed adequately, the latter too may have serious consequences. For example, the sudden demise of or withdrawal of the lead role actor or actress of a mega film project can cause a devastating stress for those involved, especially the director. But a short-term hospitalization of the same actor or actress or his or her short absence, though a stressful situation, will not have the same severity or force as in the first case, because the first case may result in the failure of the whole project, while the second instance will normally lead to some delay and added expense only. A pandemic is an enormously powerful source of stress due to its sudden outbreak, high speed of transmission, vast extent of coverage, high rate of mortality, low level of immunity in the people, absence of sure and effective remedy, difficulty in discovering a remedy due to the mutation of the causing virus once it enters the human body, etc. The best way to address the situation is always blocking its speed or contagion by restricting movement of people and their physical contacts, ban on transport and gatherings, physical distancing, use of preventive means such as gloves, face masks, PPE, sanitizers, etc., use of disposable materials and utensils, closure of schools and public activities, quarantining and reverse quarantining, isolation, and so on. How much these measures may help in keeping the menace at bay, we know they are not without negative consequences. They can give rise to very serious consequences, intricately related one with the other. Ban on transport and closure of productive activities, which need people moving and working together, will lead to fall in production, causing financial crisis and giving rise to personal and social problems, such as fall in consumption, lowering quality of life, family tensions, starvation, theft, looting, and so on. Closure of schools, clubs, restaurants, recreational centers like cinemas and theaters, places of worship, temples, mosques, and churches, etc., and ban on gatherings and public celebrations are sure to have a negative influence on the intellectual, psychological, and social life of people. The resulting monotony can breed boredom, lethargy, irritation, and difficulties in interpersonal relationships. These, in turn, may drag in conflicts, depression, and other psychic conditions, a sense of meaninglessness, and finally, suicide. As we know, when the enemy looms large and does not show any signs of retreating, and there is no effective means in hand to defend oneself, one feels cornered, and the inevitable end is none other than despair. Continued separation from others can lead to feelings of loneliness, abandonment, and despondency. Closing of schools will have its toll on the development and growth of children, as well as adding to the daily burden of the parents. The fear of contagion can cause obsessive, compulsive behaviors, continuous or repeated washing of hands, constant changing of dress, and cleaning of things, etc. It can also create xenophobia, fear of outsiders, even one's own relatives and friends, as they are suspected to be carriers of the disease. Hypochondria or hypochondriasis, the feeling or conviction that one is having the disease, even when there is no reasonable proof for it, and even agoraphobia. All these will singly or jointly disrupt the life of individuals, the groups they are members of, and finally the society as a whole. For example, xenophobia can lead to rejection, suspicion, breakup of relations, and even physical conflicts. We have read news about even life partners refusing admission in the house to the other returning from abroad. Agoraphobia can make people withdraw from the public and go into self-isolation and its evil consequences. The natural consequences of a pandemic are often strengthened and spread, not by the pandemic itself, but more by the spread of information. Spread of well-grounded information is necessary to help people guard against and defend themselves from the disease. But we know when the information furnished has no scientific basis for it, it then becomes disinformation and causes confusion and even panic among the people. Nowadays, we find every Tom and Jerry is ready to dole out any and every information without waiting to verify its worth. On the other side, the media vies with one another to be the first to come out with new information. Often, their prime motivation is hold on the society and profit in the end. This results in what is called nowadays infodemic, which is more dangerous than the pandemic itself, as lack of realistic information and supply of wrong ones can create fears and anxieties or a false sense of security, and thus can lead and has already led to causes of suicide, even of healthcare workers. And if the information given is unrealistically optimistic, it can push people into laxity in taking precautions against the spread of the virus, helping in raising the speed of contagion. From all what is said, one may get the impression that the stress situation created by a pandemic is so foreboding as to bring about global catastrophe. as already said above, stress acknowledged and well managed can be helpful for growth and development. Every situation of stress calls for an immediate reaction of flight or fight. It helps us in evaluating the stressor in all its aspects and our own forces, present or possible, to meeting it. If our present forces are found to be inadequate, we try to strengthen them or add to them. This leads to invention or discovery, and every new invention or discovery is an enrichment to the human society. In these days of COVID-19 and its concomitant stay at home, we find that people are engaged in new ways of living and spending time. Musical creations, new art forms, new cooking recipes, research activities in different fields, greater involvement in agricultural, especially horticultural works, terrace gardening, greater use of the digital media and their development, etc. Such things go a long way to keep the spirits of people up and help prevent falling into boredom, dejection, depression, irritability, interpersonal struggles, want of means of sustenance, economic problems, and the inevitable consequence of these. When people are engaged creatively, negative thoughts and their offshoots go behind the curtain. Staying at home and engaging in relaxing and productive activities enhance life satisfaction, mental strength, as well as physical immunity. When men are mentally and physically strong, their body and mind acquire the power to meet the stressing situations and overcome them, thus improving the quality of life. Ordinary people may not be able to achieve all these on their own without the help of experts. Psychologists, social workers, spiritual guides, public health workers, and in advanced cases of affliction, psychiatrists and medical personnel. It is definite that an encounter with an unexpected and strong negative event is a powerful stressor, giving rise to strong reactions, which generally pass one to the other in stages such as negation, anger, frustration, resignation, and calm acceptance. The immediate reaction to a powerful stressor, like the sudden death of a dear one, a natural calamity, or a pandemic, is one of denial. The person finds it impossible to accept the fact of such an occurrence. However, the fact remains fact and makes one acknowledge it sooner or later. As he cannot anymore deny its reality, he feels angry at it. Why should it happen? It's not just, it's cruel, and finds it difficult, if not impossible, to reconcile with it. But a clear answer to his whys and hows will not be always forthcoming, and he feels confused and unable to cope with the reality. This state of confusion and frustration exhausts him gradually and pushes him into a feeling of helplessness and passive surrender or resignation and toleration. Still, the subject is not in a state of tranquility and peace unless he is able to pass to the next and positive stage of reaction, active acceptance of the fact as something beyond one's control and as part of the existential condition of human life. When one attains this stage of the sense of reality, he is tranquil, and that tranquility will result in joyfulness. It makes him strong to withstand the stressor and come out victorious. As spiritual guides, as psychologists, As social workers, a community health workers' role come into play here, helping the victim of stress to pass through the first four negative or unsatisfying stages to the last positive one and restart life on a note of enhanced self-confidence and hope. If one had not been able to go through creatively and got stuck on any negative stage and has begun to suffer from psychosomatic ailments, help of experts in psychiatry and medicine will have to be called in. If such help and positive results do not ensue, the consequence will be that the stress situation turns out to be toxic, throwing the victim into depression and self-destruction. This is all the more true in the case of a stressor that persists, evading any known remedy, and prolongs the invention or discovery of one remedy with the constant mutation of the factor that causes it. This had been the case of all the pandemics of the past and of the extant one, AIDS, and of the latest, COVID-19, as experienced so far. This is a fact and a truth, and a close and critical look at our own reaction mode in the face of COVID-19 can make this point clear to us. What could be the means to help one under stress and safeguard him from falling victim to strain and undergo suffering, both mental and physical? The first and foremost is the provision of accurate and realistic information regarding every aspect of the stressor under our lens, a pandemic COVID-19 specifically. This information should contain elements such as the nature of the pandemic, its causes, the time of its outbreak, the speed and means of its transmission, the existing means for stemming its transmission, or the therapies available, if any, and their efficacy, and the progress of researchers in finding out means, preventive as well as therapeutic, to control it or eradicate it. Such information will help in warding off fear and anxiety and maintaining the morale of the people intact. Spreading fear-instilling description of the disease as unbreakable, unstoppable, unbeatable, no possible remedy in view, etc., will push people into fear and panic, leading to despair, depression, and doom. On the other hand, too optimistic and unrealistic information as a particular medicine has been found to be effective in curing the COVID patients, scientists have discovered a vaccine, etc., can also have negative consequences as people may be led into a false hope and sense of security and let off their guard and become lax in using means of prevention, thus helping accelerate the spread of the disease. Mental ill health of individuals will definitely create difficulties in interpersonal relationships, in families, and in the community as well. Imposition of restrictions on movement, assembling for recreation, work, commerce, education, social and political activities has to be preceded by supply of clear and convincing information regarding the gravity of the situation and conscientizing people of it. Otherwise, it may cause confusion and unrest among people. Every information has to be timely updated and published also. Encouraging people to remain relaxed and to engage in recreational and productive activities is an effective means to meet stressful situations. Children and the young can be encouraged and helped to develop hobbies which will keep them employed, especially when schools have to be kept closed as a means to control the transmission of the disease. Improved and increased home recreational facilities, such as broadcasting and telecasting of musical performances, scholarly talks and lectures, online screening of educative and entertaining videos, movies, etc., are means of sustaining the positive mood of people. And for the bit more serious groups, as college staff and students, etc., organizing and participating in activities like webinars, online discussion and study, etc., go a great length in weakening the negative impact of even a powerful stressor as a pandemic. As these activities keep the mind in good health, the body too becomes healthy and keep the quality of life up. Productive manual work and physical exercise help in maintaining bodily health and provide for the needs of life, thus keeping the disease away and the fear of it as well. Mens sana in corpore sano, a healthy mind in a healthy body, and vice versa. Corpus sano cum mens sana, a healthy body with a healthy mind. Meditation, prayer, and other spiritual activities help the mind maintain serenity and peace, and thus keep undue fear, anxiety, and panic away. In short, reading, listening to music, watching informative, educative, and recreational videos and films, listening to and taking part in enlightening talks and discussions have an effective role to play in overcoming stress during times of pandemic and other unexpected and stressful events. Definitely, any unwanted and unexpected event, and for that matter, a pandemic of global dimension as COVID-19, will bring with it stress. But it is up to the creative creature endowed with intellect and will to muster up its creative potential and convert it into eustress and prevent it from transforming itself into distress or strain. Let me conclude with a hope that the humanity will rise up to the situation, coming out victorious over the devastating pandemic with the help of the hard and relentless work of governments, scientists, medical practitioners, psychology and psychiatry professionals, and spiritual, personal, and social guides. Let the world emerge from the dark hole of the present crisis into a new and brighter horizon. Before leaving the desk, let me once more express my wholehearted appreciation for our young friends' laudable attempt at organizing this webinar in such a beautiful and efficient manner, and thank them for giving me this much valued opportunity. Thank you. God bless us all.
Thank you, Father. You have really provided us with a great insight on the topic. To begin with, you have cleared our doubts on the terms very nicely, explaining in detail and focusing on the adverse effects on humankind, both health and psychological areas. Sir, there is a doubt from my end. You have explained about a term, a disease, agoraphobia, where an individual gets isolated from a society or a community. So can you just suggest any remedy? How can a person get get cured of this particular trauma? That is agoraphobia.
Actually, when we know that someone has this problem of fear of the public and refuses to come out, the first step would be try to get in touch with him in a possible way, maybe through some activities which generally he likes, like listening to music, and so you can sing to him, or speaking with someone who is generally sympathetic towards others, who have a very approachable character, and thus you try to bring him out of his isolation and instill courage into him, and even showing scenes of people meeting together with, of course, all possible precautions like using masks, and then giving him information or news with regard to people who can gather without much of a difficulty or fear of or anxiety of getting contracted with this disease, and thus slowly try to bring him out. But if you try all on a sudden to invade him with a group or something like that, he may become all the more fearful and then withdraw, and that will be terrible. It will be extremely difficult to pull out that such a person into the public and from self-imposed isolation. And always, withdrawal is a symptom very serious to be attended to, because it is one of the first symptoms of depression and self-isolation.
Yes, true,
That
Father.
is
Father,
generally. But of course, when it goes beyond, we may have to call in experts in psychiatry and medicine even.
thank you, Father, for the explanation. Father, there are a few more doubts from our participants. The first doubt is from Russell. His doubt is like whether a pandemic is capable of enhancing xenophobia.
Could you repeat that word, please?
Uh, whether a pandemic is capable of enhancing xenophobia.
Humor?
Xenophobia.
Or homophobia?
I have like xenophobia. I just spell out the
Xenophobia.
word.
Yeah. Pandemic
Xenophobia.
is capable of enhancing xenophobia, because we know that we have to be, there is a lot of precautions, advised, warnings. So we have to be careful with people who come from outside, especially if we don't know the person personally, and so on. We have to be very careful. We have to keep 2 meters away from him, keep social distance or physical distance. And then we have to, if at all we have to happen to touch him or close near him, then we'll have to sanitize ourselves, change our dress, take a bath and all kinds. So these types of information, especially if not well grounded, that can augment xenophobia. And that has happened. I have read, but unfortunately I'm away from our news sources and so on, our newspapers. I have read, at least online, that there have been cases when family members themselves refuse to accept people who are returning home because they thought that these people are bringing in this disease. So a pandemic is capable of, because pandemic by its very nature is an evading sickness for the moment, at least to the knowledge extent. So it is definitely capable of augmenting the feeling of xenophobia.
I hope Russell's doubt is clear. Father, there is another question from Jaren James. Stress and anxiety to unemployed youth increased during pandemic as hopes and chances of getting work is getting diminished. How can one overcome it?
So the first thing, as far as we are able to say at the moment, try encourage such people to take in the situation as it is in a realistic way, and then try to engage themselves in some productive activities, some like horticultural activities, planting vegetables, or some activities which they can conduct from home itself, or even taking tuitions online if they are capable of doing that. So to help them become aware of their possibilities, their capabilities, and their inclinations, and encouraging them to enter such fields so that they will be able to employ their unemployed time. And then, of course, everything is not lost. Doomsday prophets always create greater problems. So we have to always say that humanity, the history of pandemics shows that despite such heavy blows like Black Death or the Spanish flu, world has come out victorious. Humanity has never succumbed to any of these things eternally. So today or tomorrow, the human creature is dynamic in itself and has the force and power to come out victorious. So that optimism is the one which has to be kept up without dimming itself.
Sir, next question is from Ellen Roy. Ellen Roy wants to know the difference between panic and phobia.
Yeah, panic is a sudden onslaught of a fear situation. I don't know what it is. And so you feel sudden repercussions also. The person finds it difficult to breathe, difficult to move, and as if the whole thing is blocked, and he may even fall down as if dead. So in such situations, we have to help in a very, very technical way to deal with these people. That's panic. The other one is phobia, is a general fear built up in a person due to some particular experience or reason which has been continuing for some time. And so he has to come to fear some element like xenophobia, outsiders, or the marketplace, or darkness, or something like that. Any phobia is a kind of built up, pent up energies like that. So unresolved in proper time. So you can have a child, for example, who has been told stories of devils walking around in the night with lit torches and so on. He may build up a phobia of night, darkness. He cannot go out in the night, especially. And if even a firefly can cause fear in him. And in that circumstance, sometimes he may go into panic also.
Father, next is from Anuja Ayappan. The question is, how can I cope with the stress and anxiety that I am experiencing because of this pandemic? Father, can you suggest?
First of all, we have to accept that it is a sickness. The reality is there, and with its peculiarities. We know that it is already spreading very fast, and it is invading every part of the country, and no one is free of it, can claim to be free of it. Even we have heard many doctors have succumbed to it, and rich or poor. There is no distinction, no discrimination at all in front of this. So I have a realistic knowledge about it and an approach about it. So we cannot simply run away from it. It is there and we have to live with that. But of course, there are remedies by way of prevention. And so when we follow those remedies, like whenever we go out, we use the mask. Whenever we meet, especially someone who is not a member of our own actual household, we meet that person at a reasonable distance of 1.5 meters or 2 or even more, and then always speak with mask on. And then after, when we get in back home, you wash our hands, take all such precautions, we feel secure almost. And that feeling of security, initial feeling of security, helps us build up courage and strength to meet the situation. And then instead of getting frightened by it, have a rational fear of it, so that we will be always making use of the remedial or preventive means to ward off this. If at all we get, as many get, of course there are ways and means to meet that situation also. There is treatment, if though symptomatic, but we find that from the high rate of recovery, especially in Kerala and many parts of the world, we find that this sickness is not going to engulf the whole world in a moment. And so like that, slowly take this realistic attitude and take the precautionary measures which are capable of keeping the menace away. Thus, we will be able to overcome or control the stress, and then, of course, get engaged in some creative activities such as hobby or some productive activities, some like cultivation or embroidery or whatever hobbies, whatever productive activity, and relaxing activities like listening to music or watching films or some comic activities, whatever it be. Those are the things with which we can overcome our stress and lead a normally happy, contented, fearless life.
Father, one last question. There are many questions coming from the participants, but this I found like, how does stress act as a gambling tendency of events?
Yeah, this stress, when it is in a mild form, it has a kind of a instigating thing. Unless there is some type of tension, we won't do anything. We'll be simply lethargic and go to bed. But when there is a stress, some threat, we will be trying to meet it. And then gambling is an attractive activity. We fail. Gamblers always don't win, but there is the possibility in view of winning. And if you have the means in your pocket for it, then you try. You never give up. Because off and on, that is the trick they play. The owners of gambling centers play. Now and then they help these people to win something. And so, like that, this stress is maintained, this tension is kept up willfully and purposefully, so that the man who is subject to gambling will never quit the scene. He will be always attached to the table and go ahead. Now and then he will win. Even if he is not winning, there is the hope of winning, possibility of winning, at least now and then. And that is the trick the gamble house owners use to gain profit.
Thank you, Father. All the remedies and suggestions given by you are really helpful. And I wish that all our participants will be able to overcome the trauma that they are facing. On behalf of Al-Azhar Group of Institutions, BINOCS Committee, and we all participants, we are really thank you, Father, for dedicating your wonderful time, your busy schedule for us.
Good evening, one and all. Respected Reverend Father Abbot Dr Anto Puthenpurackal, Susan Kurian, and dear spectators of the program. It was a wonderful, warm section for us as part of BINOCS. Now we are on the verge of concluding the sixth section of BINOCS. Today, Abbot Dr. Anto Puthenpurackal made it an awesome, amazing section. Even though he possesses a busy, hectic schedule, he found time to spend with us with his enlightening thought. Now he make us to go back to history and teach us to resurrect from the onslaught of various pandemic like Spanish flu and Black Death during previous centuries. Now we are going through the global pandemic corona. His talk is very beneficial for us to cope with the stress and strain that happens due to the spread of global pandemic corona. Thank you, Father, for your kind words and valuable and knowledgeable speech. And thank you especially for you invoking the blessings of Cardinal Newman that pushed me back to my old college days. Thank you for the words of Cardinal Newman. And I extend my sincere gratitude for you, Father, on the behalf of BINOCS and Al-Azhar Training College. Now, let me extend a token of thanks to Susan Kurian. She is our senior alumni of Al-Azhar BA Training College. Thank you, Susan, for your valuable time. And I express my sincere gratitude for all those participants who made it an alive section through their question. Thank you, one and all.
So, bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye, Father.
All the best to all, especially Susan, Alex,
Thank you,
and
Father.
all the other company who are behind the scene, and the people responsible for your college and institution. Please convey my gratitude and appreciation. And of course, I will be remembering you all in my prayers, as well as all those who are especially suffering during this period under COVID-19. So all the best for your career, for your studies, and for your immediate present activities. So
thank you.
God
Thank you,
bless
Father. Thanks a lot.